My friends, let us come together for a few quiet moments and rest, not in words, not in thought, but in an inner atmosphere of stillness. For unless we enter this silence, everything we say about spirit remains only theory. We are not here to gather spiritual statements, nor to add new beliefs to an already burdened mind. We are here for one purpose alone: to awaken to the presence that is already closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. Today we begin a 30-day period of living consciously in the awareness of I am. But before we speak of days or practices or even spiritual intention, we must understand that this journey is not a method for self-improvement. It is not a project we undertake in order to change our human experience or to attract better conditions. In truth, the I of God does not concern itself with conditions, for it is the substance, the life, and the law of all true harmony. Let us, then, lay down any thought of achieving something. Let us release the subtle desire to become more spiritual, more enlightened, or more capable, for none of these things have anything to do with the infinite way. The I that we seek is not the human ego trying to add divine qualities to itself. The I that we contemplate is the very presence of God, expressing as individual being. As we enter this first moment of our 30 days together, let us realize that nothing needs to be added to our life. The fullness of God is already established within us. Our task is not to get God to come where we are, but to awaken to the truth that God has never been absent. You may notice that the mind wishes to prepare itself to focus, to gather strength for this journey. But the spiritual life does not begin with human effort. It begins with surrender, quiet recognition that the only I present in this room, the only I present in your heart, the only I present in your consciousness is the I that declared, before Abraham was, I am. Not was, not will be, but I am. This I is the focal point of our month of practice. It is not an affirmation to be repeated. It is a presence to be realized. When Jesus used that sacred phrase, he was not speaking of a man. He was revealing the divine identity that functions through all true spiritual activity. And so, when we speak of 30 days of living from the I am, we are not giving the human mind something to claim. We are simply opening ourselves to the awareness of what has eternally been true. In these moments of stillness, let us acknowledge quietly, there is but one there is but one life. There is but one being appearing as many forms, and the life that beats your heart, that breathes your breath, that animates your consciousness, is that same infinite I expressing itself. As we begin this exploration, we do so without pushing thought, without directing mind, without attempting to manufacture a spiritual experience. Spiritual realization is never created. It is revealed. It appears when the personal sense of self grows silent enough for the deeper presence to make itself known. So, for this introduction, let us gently relax into the awareness that the I with which we begin these 30 days is not something we will try to understand. It is something we will witness. As the sea rises of its own accord, as the sun illuminates without request, so the I am will reveal itself when we enter the atmosphere of stillness. There is nothing to strive for, nothing to attain. Simply rest for a moment in the recognition. Here I am, Father, open, receptive, without desire, without fear, waiting upon thy voice. This is the beginning of our journey, not a journey toward God, but a journey away from the belief that we have ever been separate. This is not a path of acquisition. It is a path of remembrance. And so, with quiet hearts, we begin. Let us continue now in the same atmosphere of quietness. For unless we remain in this stillness, the mind will always attempt to grasp spiritual truth with its own understanding. And spiritual truth is not something the mind can hold. It is something the spirit within us reveals when we are receptive and still. We turn our attention to the nature of the I am. This sacred I is not a thought, not a concept, and not a statement of human identity. It is the very presence of God announcing itself. It is the divine selfhood that has existed from the beginning, unchanging, complete, perfect. When Jesus spoke the words, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he was not describing the man born in Bethlehem. He was revealing the universal identity that functions as the life of every individual who awakens to it. In these studies, it is important that we make a clear distinction. There is the I, which is personal, made up of memories, fears, ambitions, beliefs, and there is the I, which is impersonal, eternal, untouched by human experience. One is formed of the world, the other is the substance of spirit. And so, when we use the phrase I am, we are not speaking of the personal sense of I, the I that worries, strives, searches, and suffers. That I is a concept, a projection, a temporary shadow. The I am we contemplate is the presence that lives itself as you. The I am is not made holy by your recognition of it. It is holy because of what it is God expressing as individual being. During these 30 days, you will discover that the moment you try to think the I am, you lose it. The moment you try to use the I am to improve your experience, it slips away. For this, I cannot be employed as a tool of the personal mind. It reveals itself only when the personal mind grows quiet enough to let the deeper identity come forward. In our human journey, we have been taught to believe that we must become something more, something better, something greater. But in spiritual truth, we cannot become what we already are. We do not climb toward God. We awaken to the realization that God is the very essence of our being. This is why all striving fails, why all effort exhausts. Spiritual attainment is not an attainment at all. It is a recognition. You may ask, if this I am is the presence of God expressing as me, why have I not felt it before? The answer lies not in distance, but in distraction. The I am is not hidden. It is simply unnoticed. It is as present in this moment as it was in the moments of your greatest peace, your greatest joy, your greatest clarity. It does not grow or diminish. It awaits recognition. The purpose of our contemplation is not to make the I am more real, but to make the personal sense of I less obstructive. When the noise of the human self softens, when we stop pushing life with our will, when we cease reaching for things outside ourselves, a subtle awareness begins to rise. It is gentle, quiet, and unassuming. It does not declare itself with fanfare. It simply stands forth as peace. This is the nature of the true I. It never strives. It never fears. It never demands. It never seeks recognition. It simply is. When you rest in this awareness, even for a moment, you begin to sense that the life you have called your life was never yours. It is the infinite life appearing as your individual expression. And in that realization, the burden of living your life begins to fall away. Something deeper, wiser, and more loving takes over, without effort, without command. This is why we say that the I am is revealed and not created. You cannot create what is eternal. You cannot improve what is perfect. You cannot add anything to the infinite, but you can witness it. You can behold it. And in beholding, you discover that the being you believed was yours was never the truth of you. This recognition may come slowly, or it may come in a moment of profound silence. But it comes only when the personal self yields, when we stop trying to become spiritual and allow the spirit to be what it already is within us. As we proceed through these 30 days, let this be the foundation. The I you are seeking is already present. The I that lives you is the I you will discover. The I that you will come to know is the I that has never left you, not for a moment. Rest in that quietly, and let the realization unfold. As we enter this first stretch of the 30 days, let us remember that we are not beginning a discipline, nor are we undertaking a task. We are not attempting to reform the human mind or shape our experience through will. What we begin now is a gentle turning, a turning away from the belief that our life is lived externally, and a turning toward the truth that life itself is within us, functioning as our being. In these early days, you may notice how deeply conditioned the mind is to live outwardly. It seeks security in things, in people, in events. It looks to the world for validation, for provision, for safety. It tries to manage the future and reinterpret the past. All this activity is born of the belief that life is something separate from us, something we must pursue or maintain. But in spiritual truth, life is not lived outside your being. Life unfolds from within. Life flows as consciousness, not as circumstance. And so, the first days of this month ask only one thing of us: awareness. Simply observe how often the mind rushes into the world for answers. Notice how quickly it reacts to appearances, how it judges, fears, anticipates, and resists. Do not try to stop these movements. Do not wrestle with the mind. That attempt itself is still the personal sense of I, the false self trying to correct itself. Instead, each time you observe the mind moving outward, gently return to the inner center, not by effort, but by recognition. Let the inward turning be soft, like resting your head upon a pillow. Let it be as natural as closing your eyes after a long day. And as you turn within, you need not think, nor affirm, nor search. Just behold, here I am. This simple recognition, unstrained, unforced, is the beginning of opening the door to the deeper I. During these early days, it may feel as though nothing is happening. The mind may say, "This is too simple," or "I do not yet feel anything spiritual," or "I must not be doing this correctly." But understand this: you are not waiting for an experience. You are not seeking a sensation. You are simply reorienting your consciousness from the outer to the inner. This is the most delicate step of the spiritual path, and it is always the slowest, because it is here that the personal sense of I begins to lose its prominence. This shift is subtle. It feels like a softening, a loosening of the tight grip we have kept upon life. No longer must we push against circumstances. No longer must we direct outcomes. No longer must we strive to defend or justify the personal self. Instead, we pause, even in the midst of our daily activity, and silently remember: the life I am seeking is the life that is already living me. The wisdom I try to gather is already present as the mind that thinks through me. The love I hope to feel is the love that is the nature of my being. These recognitions may appear fleeting at first. They may last only a moment or two before the mind rushes back into its old habits. But within these small moments lies the seed of transformation. For every time we turn within, we loosen the world's hold upon us. Every time we rest in the I am, even for a breath, we silence a fragment of the personal sense. Do not measure your progress. Do not judge your quiet moments. Do not attempt to evaluate your spiritual awakening. In the beginning, the reorientation of consciousness is simply a matter of remembering. Remembering that you are not a seeker. Remembering that you are not a struggling personality. Remembering that the I which animates you is not limited, is not fearful, is not separate. Throughout the day, pause gently, perhaps only for a few seconds, and acknowledge, I am here, and God is the I that is here. Nothing more is required. Nothing more is spiritual. As these first days unfold, let this be your simple practice, withdrawing attention from the outer and turning softly toward the inner, not in order to produce anything, but in order to behold what has always been present, the living Christ, the divine I am, shining silently at the center of your being. We begin here not with effort, but with release. As we move deeper into these 30 days, something subtle begins to occur within our consciousness. The outer turning that occupied the early days gives way to a quieter, more intimate awareness. And with that awareness comes a silence that may at first feel unfamiliar, even unsettling. It is not the silence of emptiness, it is the silence of presence. It is the silence that remains when the personal sense of I begins to loosen its grip. For many, this stage feels like standing at the edge of a great stillness, unsure of whether to step into it. The mind, long accustomed to noise and movement, does not readily trust quiet. It wonders, is this enough? Should I not be doing more? Should I not be praying more, thinking more, understanding more? But the spiritual life does not grow through more. It grows through less effort, less interference, less reliance on the personal mind. During these middle days, you may sense a kind of emptiness within, not because something real has been taken from you, but because something unreal is beginning to dissolve. The personal self, the self that has struggled, feared, defended, and sought, begins to lose its authority. Its voice grows softer. Its impulses lose strength. And in that quieting, a deeper awareness begins to emerge. This can feel strange because we have lived so long believing that this personal self was our identity. We believed its fears were our fears, its desires were our desires, its struggles were our struggles. But as we rest more frequently in the I am, the unreality of that self becomes more apparent. It begins to fade like a shadow in morning light. Its opinions, once so loud, now seem shallow. Its urgencies no longer command the same obedience. Do not be alarmed by this. Do not be disturbed if you feel as though something is slipping away. Nothing real can be lost. Only the false self, the self made of memory, habit, and conditioning, begins to dissolve. And as it dissolves, there is a sense of being unanchored, as though the ground beneath you has shifted. Yet what is actually occurring is not a falling away, but a rising into truth. At this stage, the silence takes on a new character. It is no longer the silence of effort, of trying to be still. It is the silence that arises naturally when the inner burdens begin to fall away. It is a silence that is not empty, but full of presence, full of peace, full of a quiet assurance that does not depend on human logic. This is the silence that Goldsmith described when he said that spiritual truth is heard not in the mind, but in the soul. You may also notice that the world seems somehow less solid. The criticisms of others carry less weight. The conditions around you feel less threatening. Even your own thoughts lose their urgency. This is not indifference. It is freedom. It is the dawning realization that appearances do not define reality. The I am that you are beginning to sense is untouched by conditions. And as your awareness shifts toward that I, your relationship with the world changes. You might find that this inner quiet brings with it moments of discomfort. The mind may resist the loss of control. It may try to reassert itself, insisting that something is wrong or missing. But understand this: the discomfort is not the presence withdrawing. It is the ego losing its dominance. It is the old identity struggling to maintain its illusion of power. The silence that frightens the ego is the very atmosphere in which the true self reveals itself. Do not fight the discomfort. Do not attempt to push it away or interpret it. Simply observe it and then rest again in the quiet recognition. I am, not as a mantra, not as a thought, but as a presence that stands behind the mind. I am. This is the anchor that carries you through the dissolving of the old self. The life that does not tremble, the identity that does not change. As the days continue, you will notice that this silence begins to feel more like home. What first seemed unsettling becomes comforting. What once felt empty becomes full. And what once seemed like losing yourself becomes the discovery of your true self, not the self you imagined, but the self that is eternal, unchanging, and whole. This is the sacred work of the middle days. Not dramatic, not emotional, not filled with visions or sensations. It is the quiet dismantling of the false sense of self and the gradual emergence of the true identity. This work cannot be hurried. It unfolds in its own rhythm according to the receptivity of the soul. But every moment you spend dwelling in the I am, even if briefly, nourishes this unfolding. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with the process. And remember that the silence you meet is not a void. It is the presence of God revealing itself as your very being. As we continue through these 30 days, something begins to reveal itself quietly, without fanfare, without outward signs. It does not announce its arrival, yet it becomes unmistakable. After the dissolving of the old self begins, there comes a gentle shift, a shift not brought about by effort, but by the simple grace of resting in the I am. This shift is not dramatic. It is not a sudden burst of spiritual revelation. It comes in small moments, like soft waves touching the shore. You may begin to notice that circumstances which once troubled you no longer have the same hold. The opinions of others, which once seemed so important, now pass through your awareness with less resistance. Decisions that once required great deliberation now arise with a quiet clarity. There is a sense of being moved rather than pushing life forward. This is the natural effect of living without effort. It is the fruit of allowing the personal sense of I to step aside. You see, the I that struggles is never the true I. The I that fears, the I that worries, the I that tries that I is a projection of the human mind. It has no power of its own, no life of its own. It is a shadow self, a temporary structure built of thought. But when we rest in the real I, when we lean gently upon that inward presence, something profound occurs. Life begins to organize itself around harmony. This does not mean that every outer situation suddenly changes. It means that our relationship to situations changes. We no longer approach life as a problem to be solved, but as a revelation waiting to unfold. And because we are no longer trying to manage outcomes, the natural order of spirit becomes visible. the movement of grace becomes apparent. Perhaps someone speaks to you harshly, and where once there would have been hurt or reaction, now there is only a quiet spaciousness. Perhaps a problem arises at work, and instead of panic, there is a calm awareness that somehow, beyond your understanding, solutions are already present. Perhaps an old habit of fear begins to arise, and without struggle, it dissolves in the recognition that the I who feared is no longer in charge. These are not signs of personal progress. These are evidences that the personal sense of I is losing its reality. When we stop living through the limited self and begin living from the infinite I, the world around us cannot help but reflect that change. Not because we have manipulated the world through thought, but because consciousness is the substance of experience. And when consciousness shifts, experience follows gently, naturally, without strain. At this point in the 30 days, many discover that prayer has changed. It is no longer a reaching outward. It is not a request for intervention. It is not a hope for better conditions. Prayer becomes a listening, a quiet, resting in the awareness that the presence is already here, already active, already fulfilling its own nature. And in this listening, we begin to perceive that harmony does not come to us from outside. Harmony arises from within us, because harmony is the nature of the I that lives us. Healing begins to occur not because we seek healing, but because the false sense of separation, which is the root of all discord, is dissolving. You may find that small blessings appear unexpectedly, not because you prayed for them, but because you are no longer obstructing the flow of grace. A long-standing tension may ease. A relationship may soften. A creative insight may come without trying to think your way to it. These are not miracles in the common sense. They are the natural activity of divine law operating without interference. It is important to remember that these inner shifts are not something you produce. They arise of their own accord when you stop attempting to direct your life. They arise when you give up the belief that you must hold your world together. The true I, the I am, holds all things in perfect balance. In this stage of the journey, living becomes lighter, not easier in terms of circumstances, but lighter in consciousness. You feel more spacious within, more at rest. The world has less of a claim upon your emotions. You begin to walk through life with a quiet confidence that does not come from human knowledge, but from the awareness of an inner presence that never leaves you. These first inner shifts are not the final realization. They are the early blossoms of spiritual awakening. They are reminders that you are no longer living life as a personal being, but as an instrument through which the infinite expresses itself. Let these changes come as they will. Do not cling to them. Do not try to reproduce them. Simply behold them as signs that the true self is beginning to shine through the cracks of the old identity. As you continue resting in the I am, more will be revealed not through effort, but through grace. As the days continue, you will begin to notice a deeper shift taking place, one even more subtle than the earlier dissolving of the personal self. Something within begins to settle into a new foundation, a new dimension of being. You find that you are no longer living on the surface of life, carried here and there by events, reactions, and appearances. Instead, you begin to live from a quiet center, a center that does not move, does not change, and does not depend upon the outer world. This center is not created by your effort. It is not the result of discipline or spiritual training. It is the natural state of your being revealing itself as the false layers fall away. In this deepening, you may discover that the mind has less to say. It no longer clamors for attention with the same urgency. Thoughts still appear, of course, but they pass like birds across a wide sky, leaving no trace. Where once you felt compelled to analyze, to evaluate, to decide. Now you sense an inner knowing, a gentle assurance that life is unfolding through you rather than being directed by you. It is here that one of the great principles of the infinite way begins to take root within your consciousness. Take no thought for your life. This does not mean carelessness or neglect. It means that the source of guidance is no longer the personal mind, but the inner presence, the I that is God expressing as you. When this realization begins to dawn, you feel less pressure to control circumstances. You no longer believe that your well-being depends on what the world does or does not do. Instead, you begin to feel the rhythm of spirit moving through your experience, arranging, guiding, harmonizing without your intervention. Your actions become quieter, clearer, more purposeful, not because you have learned a new method, but because they arise from the center rather than the surface. This center is not emotional calm, it is spiritual awareness. It is not psychological stability, it is divine presence. It is not positive thinking, it is the disappearance of the thinker. Many people spend their lives reacting to life, reacting to problems, reacting to praise, reacting to fear, reacting to opportunity. These reactions form the entire texture of their existence. But as you continue resting in the I am, the need to react diminishes. Instead of being pushed and pulled by outer conditions, you become aware of an inner spaciousness from which all true activity flows. This is what Goldsmith meant when he spoke of living from within. He did not mean that we retreat from the world or withdraw from daily responsibilities. He meant that we cease living from the world and begin living from the divine source at the center of our being. In this stage of the 30 days, you may find that your work takes on a new quality, not because the nature of the work has changed, but because you are no longer doing it alone. You may notice a deeper patience in your interactions, not achieved through effort, but arising from the awareness that no one is separate from the one life. You may find that challenges which once felt overwhelming now appear as opportunities for inner listening rather than outer struggle. Every outer activity becomes an inner practice. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to behold the presence. Every moment becomes an invitation to rest again in the gentle realization, the Father within me doeth the works. And in this deepening awareness, you begin to understand something that cannot be fully expressed in words. That life does not flow from you outward, it flows from the center of your being into form. You are not an individual attempting to reach God. You are the place where God shines forth into visibility. Living from this center does not remove human challenges, but it transforms your relationship to them. You no longer meet them as a person trying to overcome them. You meet them as consciousness recognizing the presence of God within the situation. And in that recognition, the burden lifts, the pressure dissolves, the sense of I must handle this fades into the simple awareness that God is the life, the intelligence, and the harmony of this moment. This is the blessing of the deepening. You begin to experience life not as something happening to you and not as something you must shape, but as something that flows effortlessly from the inner presence that is your true identity. You are no longer living from the surface. You are beginning to live from the center. And in that center, all is peace. As we move even deeper into these 30 days, a profound realization begins to dawn, quietly, gently, without spectacle. It is not announced by emotion, nor by any outward sign. It comes like a soft light rising behind the hills of consciousness, revealing what has always been present but seldom seen. This realization is the awareness of oneness, not oneness as a spiritual concept, Not oneness as something to believe or claim, but oneness as a living experience, a direct knowing that the I you have contemplated, the I am, in whose presence you have rested, is not a personal self at all. It is not your I. It is the I that is God, the I that is universal, the I that cannot be divided, the I that speaks through every awakened soul. I and the Father are one. At this stage, something extraordinary begins to happen, not through effort, but through grace. The boundaries between yourself and others begin to dissolve. The sense of separation that once seemed so real starts to fade. You look upon another, and for a moment, you do not see a separate mind, a separate life, a separate identity. You see the same life that beats your heart beating in them. You see the same light that illumines your being shining quietly behind their eyes. This recognition does not come through will. It is not the result of thinking kindly or trying to be loving. It arises spontaneously when the personal sense of I as a separate being, I as a self-contained life begins to disappear. And in the space where that personal I once stood, the divine I shines through. You begin to understand why Goldsmith said that there are not many minds. There is only one mind appearing as many individuals. There is only one life manifesting in infinite forms. There is only one being expressing as all creation. This is not poetry. It is spiritual reality. And once glimpsed, it changes your entire experience of living. In this awareness of oneness, you discover that you are not responsible for maintaining your life. You are not separate from the source that sustains you. You are not cut off from the wisdom that guides the universe. The very intelligence that directs the stars directs your steps. The very love that holds the cosmos in balance holds your relationships in truth. The very life that fills all creation fills your breath at this moment. There is only I. The personal I that you once believed yourself to be is found to be an impostor, an echo, a shadow, an illusion created by the mind. But the real I, the divine presence, has been living your life from the beginning. It is the light behind every thought, the love behind every impulse, the peace that waits beneath every fear. When this recognition begins to settle into consciousness, a great gentleness arises. You no longer feel compelled to defend yourself, for there is no separate self to defend. You no longer need to assert yourself, for there is no personal authority to establish. You no longer fear the opinions of others, for you sense that the same I is living them too. And with this gentleness comes compassion, not the compassion that tries to fix, heal, or rescue, but the compassion that sees the divinity behind every appearance, even when that divinity is hidden by fear, pain, or ignorance. You no longer respond to others on the level of personality. You respond from the level of being, from the quiet recognition that the Christ within you is the same Christ within everyone. At times, you may experience a profound sense of peace, peace that has no cause, peace that has no opposite, peace that arises simply because you are resting in the truth. This peace is a sign that the personal self is dissolving and that the divine self is becoming more visible. This is the recognition of oneness. Not two, not many, only one. One life lived through all, one mind thinking through all, one love embracing all, one I appearing as all. In this awareness, fear cannot exist, lack cannot exist, conflict cannot exist, for these belong only to the realm of separation, and separation is found to be unreal. As this truth deepens, you begin to understand that spiritual growth is not the evolution of a human being into something higher. It is the unveiling of the divine being that has always been present behind the veil of the personal self. The personal I disappears, the divine I stands revealed, and in that revelation, all is well. As this month of living in the awareness of I am unfolds, a natural question arises. How do we return to the activities of daily life? How do we work, relate, decide, speak, and act while maintaining an inner realization of oneness? The answer is far simpler than the mind imagines. We do not return to life as we lived it before. We do not take this spiritual awareness and apply it to the outer world. Rather, we come to understand that the outer world is the expression of the inner state of being, and so the daily life itself begins to flow from a new center. During these 30 days, as you have rested in the I am, something profound has taken place within you. You may not fully recognize it yet, but you have shifted the point from which you live. You have loosened your identification with the personal sense of self and have begun to taste what it means to live from the divine center. In this new awareness, action no longer comes from effort or planning or will. It comes from a quiet inner prompting, a gentle movement that arises from within and expresses itself outwardly without strain. You will begin to notice that the way you work changes not because the tasks are different, but because the doer is different. Where once work may have felt like a demand placed upon you, now it becomes an opportunity to witness the activity of God expressing through you. The pressure to perform, to succeed, to achieve falls away, and in its place there is a quiet joy in being the place where divine intelligence acts. Your relationships, too, begin to take on a different quality. No longer are you dealing with personalities, with separate minds, with conflicting wills. You are meeting the same I that you have contemplated within yourself, now appearing in the form of another. The old habit of reacting to outer behavior softens, because you see past appearances into the truth of their being. You begin to recognize that every encounter, whether pleasant or challenging, is an invitation to behold the presence that is the life of all. And so, you no longer enter a conversation trying to persuade, defend, or protect yourself. You enter it quietly as an instrument, allowing the inner wisdom to reveal what needs to be said or to hold silence when nothing is required. In this way, your actions cease to be personal. They become expressions of the deeper I. What becomes most striking in this stage is that you begin to sense a rhythm in your day. You no longer force events into place. You no longer push against resistance. You find yourself guided, gently but unmistakably, toward the right activity, the right timing, the right words. This is the natural flow of grace operating when the personal self is quiet. At times, you may catch yourself slipping back into old patterns of fear or haste or worry, but even then, something within you remembers. Instead of fighting the fear or trying to correct the mistake, you pause quietly and return to the inner center. A single moment of recognition I am is enough to bring you back into alignment with the deeper truth. The return to everyday life is not a return to struggle. It is the beginning of living from a new place. The world may look the same, but you are not the same. You are not living life as a separate self, making decisions, solving problems, and carrying burdens. You are living as an expression of the infinite, letting the inner presence shape the outer experience. In this way, responsibility loses its heaviness. There is a sense that everything necessary for each moment is already present in consciousness. You are no longer the source of anything, you are the outlet through which the source flows. And when you recognize this, the strain of living evaporates. You do not have to know what tomorrow brings. You do not have to prepare for every possibility. You do not have to secure your future. The I that lives you knows, acts, guides, and fulfills its own nature. In this awareness, life becomes simpler, gentler, more harmonious, not because you have changed your circumstances, but because you have changed the place from which you live. You have moved from the surface, where life appears chaotic and uncertain, to the center, where life is revealed as the activity of God. This is what it means to return to everyday life while living in the I am. You no longer live from effort. You live from expression. You no longer act from fear. You act from presence. You no longer strive to make life work. You witness how life works when the personal sense of I is silent. This is the beginning of true freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom from false identity. Not freedom from activity, but freedom from the belief that activity originates in you. Allow this awareness to deepen. Allow it to guide you quietly. Allow the inner I to express itself through everything you do. And you will discover that the spiritual life is not separate from daily life. It is the life that lies beneath every moment, waiting to be recognized. And now, my friends, we come to the close of these 30 days, not as an ending, not as the completion of a journey, but as the quiet recognition that the journey itself has never been measured in days. The spiritual life does not unfold according to time. Grace does not follow a calendar. The revelation of the I am does not arise because 30 mornings and evenings have passed. It arises because something within you has grown still enough, receptive enough, open enough for truth to reveal itself. And so, this closing moment is not a conclusion. It is a continuation of the infinite way, which has neither beginning nor end. Throughout these past weeks, you have touched a deeper dimension of being. You have experienced glimpses, perhaps fleeting, perhaps profound, of a presence that lives you, sustains you, breathes you. You have felt the dissolving of the personal sense of self, the quiet arising of the divine nature, and the recognition of oneness that lifts you above the belief in separation. And although these glimpses may seem small, they are the seeds of eternal truth planted in consciousness. Once planted, they cannot be uprooted. You may not always feel the presence. You may not always rest in the I am. There will be moments where the old fears or habits arise again, but something has changed. Something within you knows the truth, and that knowing, however faint, becomes the guiding light of your path. In the infinite way, we do not strive for unbroken spiritual awareness. We do not condemn ourselves when we forget. We simply return again and again to the quiet recognition that the I which lives us is ever present, ever complete, ever whole. If in the days ahead you find yourself slipping back into the old sense of self, do not struggle to recapture spiritual awareness. Do not attempt to force silence or to recreate any experience you have had during this month. Simply pause for a moment, breathe softly, and acknowledge. I am. This gentle turning is enough. A single moment of recognition reopens the channel through which grace flows. In time, you will discover that this spiritual awareness becomes the background of your entire life. You will act, speak, and live from a deeper center without consciously trying to do so. Your outer experiences will begin to reflect the inner shift. More harmony, more clarity, more peace. Not because you have mastered spiritual techniques, but because you are no longer living as a separate self. Living from the I am is not a practice. It is not a discipline. It is the natural state of your being revealed. And so, as we close this sacred period together, let us do so with gratitude, not gratitude for teachings or insights, but gratitude for the one who reveals them. Gratitude for the presence that has been the true teacher throughout every moment of these 30 days. Let your spiritual journey continue not by intention, but by unfolding. Let truth reveal itself. Let grace guide you. Let the I Am live your life. The infinite way is not a path you walk. It is the life that walks as you. And so we rest now, not in ideas, not in effort, but in the quiet assurance that the one who began this work will complete it. Not through your labor, but through its own nature, its own light, its own infinite love. Let the presence go before you. Let the presence remain with you. Let the presence be the eye of your being. And in this awareness, all is well. All is complete. All is God appearing as your life.